Hello and welcome to everybody showing up today. Really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to join us. So let's kick this thing off. And what I'd like to do is actually send you or start a poll. Let's see here. All right. So let's launch this poll. All right, which of the following brought you to this webinar? Power Ups, Power BI, Power Automate, all of them? And Rob, I think we're getting some background noise from you over there. I think I hear Ilya, maybe?
Yeah, went ahead and muted.
All right, so it looks like from the poll results, looks like everybody's here for all of it. We're getting a majority of the votes there. A couple people here just for the Power BI side of things. All right, we're gonna close this up right now. Thank you guys very much for your responses. So let's kick this thing off. Rob, can you change it to the next slide, please? And let's get even further into it. All right, so let's introduce everybody. Starting from the top, we have Bob Wenstrand, who is our Director of Customer Engagement here. And he has 15 years of CRM experience under his belt. We are all bold enthusiasts, by the way, so we love technology, and you can see that in our little comments there. We are also joined by Daniel Gonet, who is a staff consultant with 7 years of CRM experience under his belt. And then myself, I am Nick. I'm a sales manager here, and I have 10 years of customer-focused account management. And let's get to the next slide. And this is a little bit about who we are as a company. We were founded 3 years ago, and we are up to 70 members of our BOLD group. And while we are fairly new to, or AlphaBOLD is fairly new, our experience is much, much older. We all kind of came from backgrounds where we wanted to have a little bit more customer focused, kind of give back to the community, customer focused drive there. And our experience ranges from CRM, SharePoint, ERPs, BI, QA. So we kind of cover it all. And then at the top, you'll see some of our customers. All right, so that is a little bit about us. From here on out, Rob and Daniel will be taking on the rest of this to go through the rest of the slide deck, as well as give you guys some demos. If at any point you guys have questions, please put them in the questions box. I'll try my best to answer them, or we'll bring them up throughout the presentation. If we can't answer them, then we will get with you after the presentation. All right, Rob, all yours.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Rob Wenstrand. I'm the director of our customer engagement practice. Today, we're going to talk about the Power ecosystem. Microsoft calls this the Power Platform. We're going to go over sort of some of the technologies we're going to be talking about today, provide you a few scenarios. But overall, we're going to talk about Power Apps, which is, again, a portion of the Power ecosystem that we're talking about. We're going to talk about Power Automate. We're going to talk about Power BI. And at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for some question and answer. So Daniel and I can answer any questions that you have about the presentation or some of the items that we'll be showing today. All right. So what is the Power ecosystem? Again, I mentioned that the Power ecosystem, Microsoft calls the Power Platform. It's actually a series of applications that can work independently or work in concert to help you implement software more quickly and more easily for your business. The first thing we're going to talk about is our Power Apps. And there are a couple of different flavors of a Power App, but essentially a Power App is a way of, first off, building your data structure. And Microsoft calls that the CDS, or Common Data Service. And think of it as an online database, a place for you to store all of the pieces of information that you need for your business. On top of that, we have the model-driven apps, and we have canvas-driven apps. And basically, these are two types of no-code or low-code app development platforms that allow you to build an application with very little knowledge about code. So you don't need to be a programmer. You don't need a programmer. But also, this all can sit within the cloud. So there's no compilation of applications necessary or deployment. But yeah, it's a way of building an application tailored for your business, providing you the tools to do that very quickly and easily. I think all of the items that we're going to demonstrate today were built in about a day to a day and a half by our team. So very easy to build. Second thing we'll be talking about is flow. And actually, Power Automate is the platform that Microsoft calls it, and the specific technology is Flow. It's a way of automating data across the platform and even outside of the platform. And what I mean by that is you can utilize Power Automate to bring data in from external data sources. You can use it to transfer data between your different Microsoft products or even your existing products. It's a way of automating and integrating data across the platform. And finally, we'll talk about Power BI. And Power BI is the analytics or analysis tool provided by Microsoft, also in the cloud. So we've gathered the data, we've provided a user interface with Power Apps. We're automating or enhancing the data with Flow, or bringing data in or integrating data. And then finally, with Power BI, we're analyzing or reviewing that data, providing some nice looking visuals to see what data that we have collected. So at its core, that's sort of the basis of the Power ecosystem. So I went into some of these applications a little bit in depth in sort of our intro there, but let's go a little further. So what do Power Apps add to the overall ecosystem? Well, the first thing is that I mentioned they're easy to develop, but they're also cross-platform. You're building a web application that can be available from via mobile device. It can be on a Mac. It can be on a PC. It doesn't matter what device you're accessing it on. That software will function regardless of the platform. I already mentioned low and no code approach. Microsoft calls this the citizen developer approach. And what that means is as a business user, as a business stakeholder, you yourself can be in charge of the application development due to this low and no code approach. It doesn't require you to know and understand code. You see the term responsive layout a lot recently. And a responsive layout is a web page design where you've built your design, and let's say that you want to also view that same design on a mobile application. Obviously, your screen size and layouts can differ depending upon the device that you're using. A responsive layout kind of makes use of this by you build it once, but automatically when you look at it on a mobile device, it's been optimized for mobile viewing. So you don't need to build different versions to target your individual platforms that you're trying to view the application on. You can build it once and deploy it everywhere. So Power Automate, again, we talked about the technology Flow. It's on the Power Automate platform. What does Power Automate add to the ecosystem? Obviously, it's going to allow you to automate tasks. It's in the name itself. We're going to automate data within our actual Power platform, and that means automatically generating appointments, sending emails, all those basic automation functions that you would expect. But you can access data that resides anywhere within the Office 365 or Power Apps platforms. What does that mean? It means that if I have a file that's on SharePoint, I can access that from any of the other Power Platform applications. If I have an email on Office 365, I can access that information. But it also means that there are connectors to external applications. If I need to access the Google suite of technologies, there are connectors that allow me to create appointments in a Google Calendar, trigger off of emails from Google Gmail, things like that. So it's not just within the Power Platform itself. It is a full, I would say, RPA, robotic process automation system, that allows you to connect or interconnect different pieces of software together, again, with little or no code. The final piece of technology we'll be talking about is Power BI. And And what does Power BI add to this ecosystem? Well, we can create rich graphical representations of our data. So we can see the pretty graphs and bar charts and key performance indicators that we would want to see out of the data. So it's a visualization component. It also, the way that Power BI is structured, it pulls all of the data in and allows us to interact with that data instantly. So we can click on filters, we can click on, we can drill into data, and the platform allows us to interact with that data in real time and see how our different filters and slicers and things that we add to our reports can affect the output, the end result. Additionally, we can embed these graphical dashboards into existing applications. So Power BI allows us to essentially take parameters for our reports and embed them in other applications. We've done it in other web applications. Very, very robust, mature visualization and reporting application. All right. So how do we put this all together? I think I've already covered the details, but just as a summary, for Power Apps, and you'll notice that below it, it says Act. Microsoft has sort of the overall structure for each one of these and what they do. So for Power Apps, it's acting on your data. You've got data structure and storage, data management, and the user interface. With Microsoft Flow on the Power Automate platform, it's the automation. So automation and integration with other applications. And finally, one I didn't touch on before, calculation. So with Flow, we can do complex calculations as well as simply bringing data between different systems. And finally, Power BI, the analyze portion of the platform. We can provide analysis and visualization. So before we start our next segment, which is we're going to drive into software. We're going to demonstrate something for you. Let me go ahead and set up an example scenario that we're going to use as an illustration today to show how we can use this platform, how we've used this platform to develop features for our theoretical company. Again, I mentioned that this is supposed to be a fairly easy to use application, or an easy to use application. It was developed in a short amount of time, I believe around a day and a half. But our scenario is that we have a auto detailing company called Contoso Auto Detailing. And currently they take appointments from customers. And the way that they currently manage it is they have a Google account where they keep track of all of their customer contacts. It's how they manage their contacts. So they would need to, whenever somebody would like to schedule an appointment, they would need to create a contact record in Google. They would use a shared calendar for all of their appointments. They would book that appointment within the Google Calendar. And of course, jot down notes for individual vehicles and services that they're requesting. And then the scheduler would then manually send an email to the end user saying, "Hey, you've been scheduled for an appointment." So essentially, it's a pretty much manual process for this auto detailing business. Now, again, I know a lot of you in the audience aren't in the auto detailing business, but we thought this might be a good sort of generic example to show you sort of the power of the platform. Additionally, we'll be pointing out areas that might benefit your existing environment as we walk through this. So for this theoretical Contoso Auto Detailing company, they have a couple of pain points. They spend a lot of time doing manual data entry. There's little to no visibility into their business performance metrics, and they don't necessarily have great customer service due to sometimes missing information in fields and even losing opportunities from not having enough historical data to look at. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into our demonstration. And I'm going to pass this over to Daniel, who's going to show us the first little bit of what we built.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, sorry, Daniel. Before we do that, I'd like to actually throw another poll out at our audience, and just want to see what people are currently using, if any, just so we can get an idea going into the demo. So We are launching this poll. Are you currently using any of these items? And we'll let that roll. And then Daniel, I'll get you the presenter. There we go. All right, looks like a lot of people are using Power Automate. And then a little split there for Power Apps and Power BI. Very cool. So it looks like we got some experience out there. Nice. All right, a couple more seconds and we'll close this guy up. There we go. And Daniel, you are all set to go.
Excellent. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So as Nick mentioned, I'm a staff consultant here at AlphaBOLD. And today I'll be taking us through the Power Apps side of things. So we'll start with a model-driven app, and then I'll also show you a Canvas app that kind of leverages some of the information that we have in this model-driven app in a more kind of front-end user experience way. So as Rob mentioned, we have this Contoso auto detailing company. And we have some entities here that we're looking at. Now, just to give a brief overview of what a model-driven app is, if any of you are familiar with Dynamics 365, that is built on this same model-driven app framework. And this uses what's called the unified interface. And as the name might suggest, it is a single unified interface that can be used across multiple different devices and multiple different apps. And the benefit of this is that we don't have to spend any time or effort modifying the look and feel of the system. Microsoft really does that for us, and so we can really focus on just the business needs of adding the entities we need and the fields we need and the relationships to make sure that our data is correct. So just to give an idea of some of the items that are in this interface, we have this navigation bar here at the top where we can see different types of record pathing. We also have a global search here. So you can see, for example, I'm in this contact view and I can see this Abel Cantu person. So if I search for Abel Cantu, we can see that it will globally search the system and pull up this contact record for me. Now this can filter to any records that we assign to this search. For now, it's only looking at contacts, but that is scalable, and we can even add custom entities, which we'll cover here in a moment. In addition to this nav bar at the top, we have what's called the sitemap down the left side. And in this sitemap, we can see a few different types of information. So right here, we have a dashboard, and we'll cover this a little bit more later when we get to the Power BI side of things. And then we also have some customer information, scheduling, and services. All of this is configurable, so we can say exactly what we want in different places. And you can see here that we have a few different entities that are out of the box. These entities just come with any model-driven app that you build, and they're very useful for almost any application of a model-driven app that you could ever think to use. So that would be, for example, contacts, which are just your list of any person that you interact with. And then also appointments are an out-of-the-box entity as well, which helps a lot with scheduling really anything you need. So
and
we're
Daniel,
using those. Yes.
just to interject real quick, Daniel's using the term entity, and for those not familiar, that's Microsoft nomenclature for table. So essentially, we have the contact table, and then we have vehicles. Think of them as maybe a worksheet on a spreadsheet, if you will. It's a data table. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, and so we have these that are out of the box, and then we also have these custom tables that we've created. So we have vehicles, and then we also have services down here as well. And we can go into each of these in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to cover kind of the structure of what we're working with. So essentially, a contact can have multiple vehicles, and whenever creating an appointment, we assign a contact to that appointment, and then we can specify which vehicle that appointment is for. Now, this has a lot of benefits to the approach that this theoretical company was using before, because not only do we have a much more integrated system for creating appointments, but we also have vehicles separated out so that we can clearly see the relationship between contacts and vehicles. And we can also see, for example, how often we have appointments for different vehicles. Again, we will get into this more when we get into the Power BI visualizations, but that is one of the main benefits of this approach. This also allows us to have generally better customer service because we know for existing customers what they've done in the past, as opposed to having to kind of dig through notes that are in that shared calendar in Google. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go ahead and just create a few simple records that we'll then use in the Canvas app, just to kind of show how records are created and how easy it is to manage a model-driven app. So I'm in my contacts list right now, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit the new button to create a new contact record. And so from here, I can add any information that I would like to add about this contact. So for example, I'm just going to add myself and my own email address. Okay. And I could also add additional information if I'd like. So I could add a business phone, or I could add my address, really whatever is necessary for contact management. In addition, I will show in a few minutes here that you can add fields to this very easily to store additional information. You'll see that once I've saved this contact, I now have this area here in the middle for vehicles. And this is essentially a representation of a data relationship between the contact and the vehicle. As I mentioned before, we can have multiple vehicles per contact. And so I can create however many of those I want. And this can apply to really anything. It doesn't have to be just vehicles in this case. It could be, for example, if you have assets that you want to tie to the contact, or medical devices that you want, anything like that you can add as a subgrid, and it will show this relationship. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new vehicle. And all that I need to do to enter this is put in a VIN, and I already have that VIN available. Let me just grab that. And from here, I can just hit save and close. Now, what you'll notice here is that this vehicle creation window has come up in what's called a quick create form. And this makes it very easy to manage data because it's all kind of picture in picture. It's all on top of itself. So I can just hit save and close here. And this has now created my vehicle. Now, obviously, that VIN is not especially useful for looking back at that vehicle in the future to get an idea of what it's doing. Now, what's happening here is we actually have an automation that's running in the background to fill in all of the data of this vehicle. I can go ahead and hit refresh on this page to see if it's updated, and it has. So you can see that not only do we have additional information about this vehicle, we even have an image. So if I click into this vehicle record, we can see a lot of information has now been filled in, and all that I put in there was this VIN. And this we will talk about a little bit later when we get to Power Automate, but this is some of the power of what you can do with that application. In addition to just creating records, I'd like to show how easy it is to modify fields, or really just to modify forms in general. And so by a form, what I mean is if I click into a contact record, this here, essentially the structure of what it's showing me, this is a form. And I'm just going to go ahead and modify this form. This here is the form editing window. And you can see that we have some fields here on the left, and then just a perfect representation of what that form looks like here in the middle. And so any change that I want to make to this form is very straightforward. It's no code. I don't have to worry about the UI. It is literally just drag and drop. So in this case, for example, I want to grab the date of birth. So I'm just going to drag that in, and I can put that really anywhere. I guess I'll just put that here at the bottom. And so we've now dropped in this new date of birth field. So from here, we can just save this record, and then we will publish it. And once we do that, we will be able to essentially in real time see the change that we just made to this contact form. Just going to go ahead and hit publish. And once that finishes, we'll go back to the contact record just to show that we have this new field added.
And Daniel did have a question come through here,
Sure.
and it kind of relates to this. So
Okay.
it looks like it's pretty straightforward to add the field. What about that vehicles section? Someone asked if it was straightforward to do a whole new section right there.
Gotcha. Good question. So with this vehicle subgrid here, if I click on the actual subgrid, it'll pop up some information here on the right side. Let me move my GoToWebinar icon. So you can see here that we actually see what the entity is that this is tied to. And if I click this drop down, you can see all of the different entities that are in the system that are related to contacts. And so I can pick any of these related entities and add that as the subgrid, and it will dynamically change what that subgrid is showing me. So as long as we just have that relationship in place, we can make that modification.
So super easy. Cool.
Yep, very easy. No code, all just clicking and drag and drop.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, of course, you can add an additional subgrids as well, right? So you're not just tied to one subgrid, and everything that you're seeing here is completely movable. So we can move it around, we can change the layout and things, right?
Yep. So for example, I just clicked on this new component button, and I can just come down here to subgrid and then add a subgrid, just like that. I'm not going to do that now, but it is very straightforward to do.
Very good. Yeah, I think a couple other examples to point out. Obviously, we've built this sort of sample application to walk you through some of the basics of the Power Platform. But if you're like in life sciences, for example, you might be able to build a very simple application like this to track product R&D. Maybe in IT services firm, you could actually build an app to track internal assets or fix assets or computers that your customers are having issues with. So there's, really the examples here are endless. There's so much you can do with this platform.
Yep. And as you can see, the change that we made to this date of birth field has been added to the contact form, and we can do whatever we want with it. And it's actually a date picker control, so we can just specify a date, and we have that information forever on this record. Cool. So outside of a model-driven app, we also have Canvas apps. And Canvas apps are generally more useful if you have a particular flow that you want to guide either users or customers through. And so in this case, as our example, we've created a Canvas app that will be used by a front desk clerk at this auto detailing shop. And they'll be able to enter all of the information from the customer and make sure that we get this appointment processed correctly. Now, this has a few benefits doing it this way with a Canvas app. As Rob mentioned earlier in the presentation, we can deploy once and then have it everywhere. And in this scenario, we don't need a full mouse and keyboard and a full computer. Excuse me, we can just use an iPad instead. And so that not only cuts down on hardware costs, but it also allows this front desk individual to be a little bit more mobile and a little bit more kind of collaborative with customers. And it's also an easier interface for them to interact with. They can just do everything with a few touches of the finger. So let's go ahead and go into this Canvas app. Now, with Canvas apps, you can see that there's no real structure to the UI that's enforced. It is really a blank slate that you can do kind of whatever you want with it. In this case, we're using some of the basic assets that are available, the basic fonts, the basic button appearances. But all of this is configurable, all of this is customizable. You can even put custom backgrounds on these as well. It's really up to you. But let's go ahead and step into the shoes of this front desk rep. And I'm going to go ahead and process a new customer that's coming in, or rather an existing customer, who wants to do some external detailing to their apparently Corvette Stingray. So I'm just going to select external detail, and you can see that it's changed my description and my price. And then I can go ahead and book this appointment. Now from here, I can just enter the name of an existing customer. So if I do, for example, one of the customers that we looked at before, you can see that Abel Cantu has 3 vehicles. And so we can choose one of these vehicles and have that processed for the appointment. In this case, though, I'm going to use the contact that we created a little bit earlier in this presentation, which is me. And we can see that we have my 2011 Nissan GTR here, which is not actually my car. But let's go ahead and process this appointment. So from here, we have a very simple form that we can enter information about this appointment on. All that I need to do here is just add a start time and an end time. So I'm going to say that this appointment is tomorrow at 6 a.m. And we're going to say that that's maybe a 2-hour appointment for that external detailing. Okay, so I've entered my times, and then from here, I can just hit this submit appointment button. And what this is doing in the background, this button is tied to a Power Automate flow. And what that flow is doing is it's creating all of the requisite records and relationships behind the scenes to create this appointment correctly, just like I would if I were manually entering it in the model-driven app. But this really allows us to automate this whole process. So if I go back into the model-driven app and I go to appointments, if I then sort it by the start time, so newest to oldest, we can see right here at the top that we have this appointment that I just created from my Canvas app immediately visible in my model-driven app. And we can see that the start time is 6 a.m. and the end time is 8 a.m. as expected. In addition to this, another flow also ran. Not only did we create this appointment, but we also sent an email notification automatically to this customer. So if I go into my email outbox, or inbox rather, we can see that I have this new email here. And if I click into it, we can see what it says. So it's telling me that a new external detail appointment has been scheduled. So it's telling me not only the service that I chose, but also which vehicle it is and on which day, in addition to the fact that it will take approximately 2 hours. And all of this is automated, so this is a pretty major time save, and it means that this will never be missed. It's essentially impossible to miss it at this point.
Hey, now Daniel, before you dig into the details of this, of how we created this Power Automate, I'd like to close the loop a little bit on the Canvas app portions. So for everybody on the call today, Canvas apps are a blank slate. If you're not familiar with Canvas apps, that is. They're essentially a blank slate. They allow us to build a custom application, very custom application, including all the UI elements. Again, minimal code, so no code to minimal code. So it provides a very simple designer that allows you to drag and drop different elements and you wire them together and can produce something very quickly, such as what we have built here today. A couple of sample scenarios to think about. Imagine creating a touch screen device that you can have at your trade show to allow customers to interact with your products or capture their data. Additionally, a lot of customers are using it for having in their lobby for sign-in for COVID, right? So we want to do a lot of contact tracing. So whenever somebody comes to an office, we want to be able to provide a nice little interface that allows them to use hand sanitizer, type in some of the basic information about who they are, things like that. So just a few examples of what we could build using Canvas apps. Back to you, Daniel.
Yep. Yeah, and with the low-code approach of Canvas apps, essentially the extent of what that would look like are kind of like Excel formulas in a way. They're very simple, almost drag and drop versions of an Excel formula. But yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look at how this email was actually generated in Power Automate. So if I come over to this tab here, this is actually the flow that ran to create this email. Now I'm going to refresh this page so that I can see the most recent run. And so we'll see here that we actually have two different flows. This one is creating the appointment and this one is creating the email. Now, if I click into the one that creates the email, you can see that there was a run that just happened about 3 minutes ago, which lines up with the one that we just created. So let's go ahead and click into this run, and we can actually see what the flow was doing behind the scenes. Now, this tool, this ability to actually see each run is incredibly useful for not only debugging, but also just seeing what kind of data is coming through to just make sure that things are going well. And you can see, for example, if I click into a given record, it actually shows me the exact output of what's happening. And this is the case for really any of these tiles. But let's cover what this is doing kind of in a higher level sense. So this step here, when a record is created, updated, or deleted, this is hooking into that common data service that Rob mentioned at the start, which is really the underpinning of all of the data that's used for Power Apps. And what this is doing is it's looking at the appointment entity that we have in that model-driven app, and it's seeing whenever a record is created in that appointment entity, it will then run this flow. So the first thing it does is it gets a little bit of additional information out of that appointment. And then it gets a few different pieces of related information. So it needs the vehicle, it needs the contact, and it also needs this appointment services entity, which essentially is just a connection between the appointment and the service that's being provided. Once we get all of that related information, we're then just doing a few compose operations, which are essentially just grabbing data from what's being pulled here, and then just reformatting it. So for example, we're grabbing this start date and we're just reformatting it into this nice clean date field. We can then, at the very bottom here, send out the email. And what you'll notice, if I actually go back and look at the really the edit version of this flow, we can see how this email connector is built. So I just clicked edit here to go back to kind of the main designer of flow. And we can see down here that all of these elements are dynamic. It's pulling this information from the records that we gathered earlier. And it's all just drag and drop. You can very easily just click somewhere in there and then pick the item you need out of this dynamic context and just add whatever you need. It's very straightforward, very easy, and no code. And this, by the way, is a connector right here. This is using the email notification v3 connector. And this just allows us to send notifications to any email address that we specify. Now, the benefit of this is pretty immense. As I mentioned when we were looking at the Canvas app, this allows users to not have to manually send emails at all. And so in the previous state, it could have taken them 5 minutes to draft up an email and send it, and sort of the context switching of having to make sure that we create that contact, and then we create the calendar appointment in the shared mailbox or the shared calendar, and then we go in and send this notification. All of that's gone now. We press a single button and it does all of that for us because of Power Apps and Power Automate.
And Daniel, I got a question for you here. For the Canvas app, you're pulling data from what it looked like from the model app. Does the Canvas app need to pull data from the model-driven app, or can it use other sources?
It's a good question. So no, the Canvas app does not need to pull data from the model-driven app. That's what we've done in this scenario, but it's not required. Just like Power Automate or Power BI, which we will cover, this uses connectors to get data. So we can use connectors for the model-driven app, which is what we've done here. But there are also additional types of connectors, really for anything from connecting to a SQL database or something in Azure to even something like a Pinterest board. There are hundreds of connectors and more being added every day.
Sweet.
All right. So thank you for that, Daniel. I think a little earlier in your presentation, you had created a vehicle, and that vehicle had automatically been populated with additional data, correct?
That's correct.
So actually, Nick, if you could go ahead and pass me presenter.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. All right, you're all set there.
All right. Okay. So so before me is sort of the run history for one of the flows that we built to grab data. I think Daniel did a pretty good job of discussing how Power Automate works and what it is, or flow specifically within the Power Automate platform. But I wanted to kind of walk you through the execution of a little bit more complex flow that we built for the scenario. Again, he entered that vehicle with the VIN number. And what we did is we went out and reached out to an external web service to pull data from that web service to get information about that car via that VIN number and populate it back into the system. Again, we're touching a data source that's outside of the Microsoft platform. So we're looking at, again, get VIN number information, which is the flow that we built. And we can actually see all the times that it's run in the past. And as I think David also showed you, Daniel also showed you, is if you click into the actual run, we can actually look and see how that information executed and what happened. So I think as Daniel also mentioned, this is using a trigger based upon the common data service. So it's looking for the VIN number values to change on that vehicle record. And then what it does is we have a few conditions. So these are sort of true false conditions. We're making sure that the VIN is proper length. So we're making sure it's 17 characters long and that it's not empty. And then what we're doing is we're going out and using, these are requests to external web services. So we're getting the image based upon the VIN number, and we're also getting vehicle details. And if I expand out the vehicle details, again, I don't want to get too deep into what we're seeing here, but we can actually see the data being returned from that external service. It's providing us sort of the enhanced data here. So we've got a Nissan GTR, the engine and the trim level and things like that. So we've gone outside of the Microsoft platform. In fact, we're connecting to this API and feeding it this particular VIN number. We're parsing that data, and then simply all we're doing is we're updating that record. Again, the record that changed. So the VIN number changed. We're making sure the VIN's proper. We're getting the data, and then we're simply updating that record with the field data that we had previously pulled. Really quite straightforward, very easy to use. Doesn't require a whole lot of knowledge, and we can automate a lot, bring in a lot of data. I wanted to expand a little bit on triggers. So this is the start of any individual flow. So I've actually created a basic flow that has no pieces in it, and I wanted to talk about how do we start a flow. And again, I think Daniel briefly touched on this, but we can always use the common data service. So whenever a record is changed within a model-driven app, essentially the CDS, we can trigger and start this flow. So this flow will automatically run when a record is created, and we can choose the entity or the table name that we want. But I also wanted to talk about some additional triggers that we can do. So obviously we can trigger on data within the Microsoft platform, but what about Gmail? Again, the Power Automate platform has hundreds of connectors built into it. And you'll notice that one of them is when a new email arrives within a Gmail account. So I could select this as a trigger, and I could have automation happen automatically. I bring this one up because, again, in our Contoso auto detailing scenario, they currently use the Google Suite for emails and for calendaring. And let's say that you're trying to implement something very quickly, but you don't want to have to translate all of what you're doing off the current platform. You just don't have time. Well, what we can do with Power Automate is that we can actually integrate with those other platforms to continue using them side by side until we're able to migrate all of our functions off onto say the Microsoft platform. So we can create triggers from when an email arrives. Additionally, we have actions. So once we've triggered on a particular event, we can actually interact with the Gmail service to send an email via Gmail. We can, again, we looked at calendaring earlier. We can go to Google Calendars and we can create an event in a Google Calendar. So we've created an appointment in our new system, but let's say that we have users still using a shared calendar. We can actually go ahead and, utilizing Power Automate, also create that event within the Google Calendar to maintain that existing functionality so that we have a better way of transitioning from other technologies or continue using external technologies. So just wanted to point out that it is a very powerful platform, and there's a lot that we can do. All right, so I think we've demonstrated a few examples within Power Automate, but just to close the loop on this, you can use external sources. You can trigger off of numerous different events. It doesn't actually necessarily need to be within the Power Platform. We can actually create a schedule event. So if you wanted a process to run at a certain time every day, we can actually utilize a recurrent schedule where we would schedule it based upon a particular day, time, week, month, etc. So there's a lot that we can do within Power Automate. The final thing we're going to show you today is Power BI. And
hey, Rob,
yeah, go ahead.
do you mind if I interrupt you real quick here? Just before you get into Power BI, we did have a question come through, and it is what authentication are you using to pull VIN info using the HTTP service call?
Sure, that's a great question. So I will tell you, since it's a very specific technical question, I can tell you that Power Automate has essentially an HTTP call, and this particular service utilizes a key-based method. So when I set up and again, I didn't go this deep into the actual flow, but it uses a pre-shared key in the header as a header, essentially header authentication, but it also does have a number of different authentication methods that you can use to authenticate to those external API services. In this case, I'm just using a pre-shared key, which was set up as part of that HTTP request to that service. So there you go.
All right, thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question.
I hope so.
Additionally, if you have, if anybody has any additional questions, we'll have contact information at the end. You can go and feel free to email us, and we'd be happy to talk with you and answer any questions you might have. So, all right. So moving on to sort of the last portion of the Power Platform, and that's Power BI. And just to remind everybody, with the old system that Contoso Auto Detailing used, they struggled to have visibility into the services that they were providing their customers. Additionally, the information about the services provided to those individual vehicles were hidden in note fields and not easily indexed. So let's take a look at what we can do to combat that using Power BI. All right, so I'm going to go back to our model-driven app. And what I've done is I've opened up our contact Able Cantu. You'll notice that, and actually, if I go ahead and refresh this here, we'll see the the new field that that Daniel added earlier. Daniel, did you add that to the contact or?
I did, yes. Let me take a look at it.
Okay, there it is. So just refresh the page, and we can actually see now that he's added that field, that it's there. You'll notice that at the top we have some of these other tabs on this particular record. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Analytics tab. And what we've done is we've actually built a embedded Power BI report that's specific to these individual contact records. So if we're taking a look at Able Cantu, we can actually see the details of all of his previous appointments, what vehicles he's had, how much money he's spent with the organization, the number of years he's been a customer, the number of total appointments. So basically, a lot of the information that we didn't have readily available or even recorded, we now have the ability to really drill into that or see that data visually. We can see that he spent the most amount of money on his Volvo XC90. One of the other things that we can do, of course, is that this is all filterable. So if I chose a different vehicle, for example, I chose that Volvo, it's going to automatically adjust all of our KPIs and services and everything that's in our dashboard based upon the filters that I've selected up above. And of course, we can also choose services, and you'll see that there are 0 because he's not had any internal details on his Volvo yet, but it will automatically filter the data that I have available based upon what I've selected. The other thing that we built is we built an overview dashboard. So on the left-hand side, you'll notice that there's a button here that says, or a navigation item that says Dashboards. If I go ahead and click on Dashboards, you'll see that we've created a very similar looking dashboard, but this is actually geared more toward the overall business. So Contoso Auto Detailing has taken in $42,000 in revenue. We have a breakdown of revenue by service. We have a detailed table showing us all of our customers and what they've spent. And you'll notice that our biggest customers appears to be Destiny McGowan. You'll also notice that these are interactive. So if I click on this link, it will actually take me to that customer record. And maybe I want to take a look at the individual details about that particular customer. I will also say that within the overall scope of what we were talking about, this dashboard itself was also created in that same time period that we built everything. So this didn't take months and months to generate. This is all very simple stuff that we put together very easily using Power BI and embedded within the platform. Again, just to show one more time, this is all filterable. So if I were to select an individual customer, let's go ahead and select that Volvo. We'll be able to see, oops, didn't mean to do that. We'll be able to see the number of services that we've done on that particular vehicle. We can come down here and take a look and see that, well, Abel's the only one who's used that particular vehicle, and here are some of his details. So again, this new system over the old system, the new system provides insights into the vehicles that their customers are having detailed, allowing them to make decisions such as what type of detailing products that the company might need to be purchased based upon the services that they're offering. Additionally, they can make determinations on what type of cars to market our services to. All right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to our slide deck. We'll finish up here. So I just wanted to conclude on what we accomplished in our scenario today. So let's compare and contrast what we went through with Contoso Auto Detailing. So before, for contact and data management, they use Google Contacts for managing customers. After, we have a fully searchable model-driven app contact database, and it's integrated with vehicle and appointment data. So we have that external data that we weren't able to capture before. It's in an organized manner. It's indexable, searchable, and I have multiple ways of accessing that data. Appointment management. Before, appointments were scheduled manually on a shared calendar. Today, we have a Canvas app to sort of simplify appointment entry, and additionally, we have some email automation. So before, we had to manually draft an email and send it to a customer for appointment confirmation. And now we have emails that are automatically generated and sent with Power Automate. So overall improved functionality. We have minimized data entry so that we can integrate better with other data. We have fully integrated analytics platform. So we have visibility into historical metrics and what our current customers are interested in purchasing. And we've improved our customer service because we have decreased the amount of time it's taking our staff to schedule appointments. We can take a look at our customer history of what they've purchased in the past, and we can properly adjust to new trends that are coming forward with that, with our industry. And with that, I believe that we finished. So it's back to you, Nick.
Great. Thank you guys so much for that presentation. And thank you for asking or answering all the questions on the fly like that. Appreciate it much. So I'm going to wrap this up real quick so you guys can have a little extra time at the top of the hour here. But if you are interested in learning a bit more about the Power ecosystem, then we would be happy to sit down with you on a call, learn a little bit more about your organization and what your needs are, and then we can kind of discuss the challenges you're going through and how using this Power ecosystem can help overcome those challenges and then overall just benefit your organization. So if you can, skip over to the next slide so we can put our contact info up there. If you are interested, please email us, call us, fax us, just get in touch with us. We'd be happy to talk with you. We will be sending out the recording after this as well as some documents just to further enhance your knowledge of the Power ecosystem. And thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Now, Nick, before we completely finish up here, sorry, we have 6 minutes left. So if there were any additional questions that we wanted to field from our group, our audience.
Yeah, I did check the questions and it looked like you guys had covered all of them so far.
Okay, very good. Well, if that's the case, thanks everybody and have a great day.
Thank you guys.
Have a good one.